All right, hi guys. I'm back today and I'm going to do another personal vlog. So I'm getting on my camera. And trigger alerts. This is a bit of a segue from my last video, which was about UFOs and ETs. And I want to let y'all know I'll be talking more about all of that because I think it's really important for me to sort of, I'm taking it through sort of a methodical process about critical thinking. But I want to say that part of the reason that I've held back for a long time making videos about that kind of subject matter is because I wanted to come to a better place in myself of self-love and acceptance and, personal power, right? And I've done a lot of work on myself for a while now, and I've made major breakthroughs, especially during the first few months of this year. And I've really come to a place where I no longer suffer over suffering, if that makes sense, and I think it does. It's a great place to be. I really have come to a place of authentic self-love, and guess what? It triggers people. Because I don't have any toxic people in my life anymore, and I don't put up with abuse. And I definitely have come to see how a lot of, the difficulties I've had in the past have had to do with my own self-esteem and personal responsibility. And I've come to the kind of place where it's like, I'm not triggered by insults. I'm not triggered by insults like ugly and stupid and weak. And so I invite you to consider that if you're triggered when somebody calls you an insult like that or an ad hom attack, that maybe you should consider that part of you agrees with that, and that's what you really need to work on. Because if you have low self-esteem, the key is really about doing things that impress yourself, right? You got to stop trying to, it's not about other people. You shouldn't be trying to impress other people. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how our society is so narcissistic. But I disagree. I think our society is actually heavily codependent. And a lot of people are looking, to get that self-esteem from the narcissistic types, because the narcissists don't love themselves, but they love the ego, right? And the ego is where, the ego function is where the self-esteem is wrapped up in, right? Because the ego is not an entity, it is a function. You're the entity, the ego is your shell, it's the function. It's a function that is so damaged in so many of us, right? Like, look at me, I have a wonky right eye from birth. So I've always had a damaged ego shell, and that definitely affected my selfhood, right? And in some ways it's actually been kind of a gift for me, ironically. But I saw this video a while back, and it summed it up really well. It was something to the effect of basically arrested development people are attracted to narcissists and suspicious of empaths. And I thought about that and how much it describes our societal dynamic, right? And I'm seeing a lot of the, people around me, especially online, it becomes very clear, like a lot of the empaths are the ones who get all the flack, they get all the suspicion, they get a lot of hate, because the haters subconsciously know they can dump on those people because those people are very sensitive and they'll absorb it, right? And so I see a lot of the low self-esteem empaths react a lot, and it's hard to take personal responsibility for all that. So if somebody, is triggering you, you've really got to take some personal responsibility for why it's triggering you and then move on from there, right? But that's really hard for people. And so I noticed, because I've done that work and I'm not triggered when somebody calls me ugly or stupid or weak, a lot of times, because they can't trigger me with that kind of ad hom attack, they actually escalate to threats. That's when you know it's weak, right? But that's been my experience on YouTube, and a lot of my experience with people also, and part of the reason why I ignore so many people and I just shut off the comments is because I notice a lot of the kind of like arrested development people and the narcissists, they just expect me to give them all my empathy and all my attention and time, but when it comes to the reverse, they have none for me. They have no empathy for me and my process. And they want my time and energy for free, of course, too. So I just stopped all that. I started to come back to myself and my work and process, and I'm in a good place about it now. I don't have great video production quality, but I think my content is pretty solid, and I'm very proud of a lot of the content I've produced on YouTube. Even in the past, when I wasn't in the best place, I still agree with a lot of what I posted. It's just a public record for me. But when it comes to things like ETs and UFOs, I take that real seriously, because I've put myself on the line for that stuff, and I actually have way more knowledge and real experience than most people who, present themselves as the big authorities. And a lot of, there's all kinds of stuff online where people are either trying to get you to fear ET or overly trust them. Or you have the narcissistic gurus presenting themselves as like the emissary for all the good ETs, or presenting themselves as like this, big authority on the subject when, and a lot of these people are professionals. They're professional operatives for a reason. The control system and the controllers on this planet have worked overtime to produce this arrested development kind of society that we have right now. And a lot of that arrested development is because the initiation process is not happening. The initiation process into adulthood and real emotional maturity is not happening for a lot of people. And we have botched rites of passage. And that's why I think we're seeing so many people act like teenagers in their 40s and 50s even, and beyond. And so I think, you have a lot of this emotional immaturity, this refusal to take personal responsibility, and all of that, when you mix it with these subjects like ETs and whatnot, well, you can see how this codependent society would be handled all the way, and any outside entity, anybody who's got a benevolent heart is not going to want to take advantage of that. But they're also not going to bully, enable, and sit back while we get crushed by the Illuminati, right? So I'm going to talk a lot about that kind of stuff in my next video, about when I go there, about the whole UFO and ET thing again, and talk about, coming at it from more of a critical thinking process. Because I've had to do that. I had to get real about this subject in my life, and it's actually, all of this has been, everything I've been through has been worth it to come to this place, right? I mean, really the real accomplishment for me has been internal. And I'm so happy about that. So now I'm going to do some external work, and it's just a public record. And I find it amusing when people are that triggered by me. But, I think a lot of people, and part of the reason I'm making this video is I have a lot of friends on YouTube and people whose channels I admire, and they let their haters have way too much influence. They also, I think a lot of people should have higher self-esteem, but don't. And so I invite you to look at yourself more honestly and see where you have impressed yourself, and work towards impressing yourself. Um, and instead of just like constantly feeling like you have to prove yourself to other people. And that's kind of where I want to go with, with my own personal process. That's where I've gone with it. And so I'm just a lot happier about it.